He moved like a shadow, his presence as unremarkable as the grass he meticulously trimmed. Nobody at the high-security NATO compound spared a second glance for the quiet groundskeeper, who listened to their high-stakes chatter with an almost unsettling attentiveness. They called him just the gardener, a dismissive label for a man whose hands, though calloused from manual labor, once held the fate of elite military units. What happened when a routine security alert shattered the compound's calm, forcing a revered NATO commander to look closer, to utter a single, chilling word that changed everything they thought they knew about this unassuming man? You won't believe the electrifying revelation that followed, a truth that transformed the gardener into something far more dangerous, far more legendary. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The hum of the electric lawnmower was a familiar drone, a monotonous symphony that punctuated the otherwise hushed environment of the NATO command compound. Here, nestled deep within a sprawling military complex, the air thrummed with the silent tension of geopolitical strategy, the weight of international security resting lightly on the shoulders of its inhabitants. But for the man pushing the mower, the daily routine was a carefully constructed facade, a meticulous performance of anonymity. He was a man of quiet habits, his movements precise, almost meditative, as he guided the whirring blades across the immaculately manicured lawns. His work uniform, a nondescript green jumpsuit, blended seamlessly with the verdant surroundings, making him almost invisible to the officers and analysts who strode past, engrossed in their discussions of intelligence briefings and strategic deployments. He was just the groundskeeper, a background fixture, dismissed by the crisp salutes and hurried conversations of those who held the levers of power within these fortified walls. His name, or rather, the name he used, was John. He rarely spoke, offering only a curt nod, or a brief, almost guttural assent when addressed. His face, weathered by sun and time, was a canvas of stoic silence, revealing nothing of the intricate machinery of thought that constantly whirred beneath its surface. His eyes, though often downcast, missed nothing. They observed the subtle shifts in posture, the nervous tics, the unspoken anxieties that leaked from the high-ranking officials. He noted the security rotations, the blind spots in the CCTV coverage, the subtle changes in the guards' patterns. Everything was data, processed and filed away in the capacious archives of his mind. He listened, too. The wind carried snatches of conversations from open windows, from hurried phone calls in the manicured rose gardens. He heard snippets of intelligence, code names, whispered concerns about escalating tensions in distant, volatile regions. "The situation in the Balkans is deteriorating, Commander," he once overheard, as he pruned a stubborn rosebush near an open office window. "Our assets are stretched thin. We need a contingency plan, something unconventional." John simply continued pruning, his hands steady, his expression unreadable, but the words resonated with a quiet familiarity within him. His calloused hands, stained with earth and grass, belied a past that was anything but mundane. These hands, now tending to flora, had once disarmed explosive devices with delicate precision, had navigated treacherous terrain with unerring accuracy, and had held firearms with lethal intent. He carried the weight of those memories, not as a burden, but as a silent testament to a life lived on the precipice, a life where every decision was a matter of life or death. The scent of freshly cut grass was a stark contrast to the acrid smell of cordite and dust that once defined his existence. One particularly sweltering Tuesday, the air in the compound felt heavier than usual, thick with an unspoken anticipation. The usual measured pace of the officers was replaced by a restless energy. John, meticulously edging the lawn around the main administration building, noticed the increased patrols, the heightened alertness in the security guards. Something was amiss. His senses, long accustomed to detecting the subtle shifts in the atmosphere of a secure facility, registered a heightened state of alert, an unspoken tension that hummed beneath the surface of the compound's rigid calm. He continued his work, his movements unhurried, but his internal radar was spinning, absorbing every minute detail. A sleek, black-armored vehicle, its windows tinted, glided silently towards the main entrance. It was followed by a smaller, equally nondescript sedan. From the first vehicle emerged a figure who commanded immediate attention. Brigadier General Maxwell Thorne, a man whose reputation preceded him, a living legend in NATO circles. Thorne was a formidable presence, with a ramrod-straight posture, an austere face etched with years of command, and eyes that missed nothing. He was known for his decisive actions, his unyielding resolve, and his uncanny ability to navigate the most complex and dangerous geopolitical landscapes. Thorne carried a worn leather briefcase, its contents undoubtedly containing classified documents of immense importance. As he stepped out, he briefly paused, his gaze sweeping over the meticulously maintained grounds, a professional appreciation for order and precision. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, suddenly narrowed. They locked onto John, who was trimming the precise edges of a flower bed, his back slightly turned. It was just a fleeting glance, a momentary flicker of recognition, but it was enough. John, feeling the intensity of that gaze, continued his work, not daring to make eye contact, maintaining the carefully crafted persona of the unassuming groundskeeper. He knew the general's reputation, a formidable intellect, and an uncompromising leader. He hoped the fleeting attention would pass, that he would remain unnoticed, a ghost in the meticulously tended garden. But it didn't. General Thorne took a step forward, his eyes still fixed on John, a strange, almost incredulous expression slowly dawning on his face. He seemed to hesitate, a slight tremor passing through his usually unyielding frame. He opened his mouth, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, a single word, sharp and chilling, cut through the hum of the mower and the muted sounds of the compound. Warhound. The word hung in the air, a spectral presence, a fragment of a forgotten, dangerous past. The hum of John's mower suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. His hands, which had been steadily guiding the machine, froze. His breath caught in his throat. The carefully constructed facade, the years of anonymity, threatened to shatter. He knew that name. A name whispered only in the darkest corners of intelligence briefings. A name associated with impossible missions, with a ghost who walked through fire and emerged unscathed. The groundskeeper, Samuel Briggs, was about to be seen, truly seen, for the very first time. His quiet life, his meticulously crafted persona, was about to be irrevocably shattered. The single word, Warhound, uttered in a low, almost reverent whisper by Brigadier General Maxwell Thorne, detonated in the quiet afternoon air like a silent bomb. John, whose official name on the compound's payroll was Samuel Briggs, felt the carefully constructed walls of his anonymous existence crumble around him. The hum of his lawnmower, moments ago a comforting drone, now seemed to mock his shattered composure, a stark reminder of the mundane world he inhabited. His hands, still gripping the mower's handle, trembled almost imperceptibly. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the general's presence. To do so would be to break character, to reveal the lie that had been his life for years. But his mind raced, a torrent of memories, images, and emotions flooding his consciousness. Warhound. It was a name he hadn't heard in years, a code name from a life so far removed from manicured lawns and pruned rose bushes that it felt like a dream or a nightmare. It was his call sign, the name given to him by the few, the very few, who knew his true capabilities, his true nature. It was a name steeped in blood, sacrifice, and impossible victories. General Thorne took another step closer. His eyes, once piercing and stern, now held a profound, almost disbelieving recognition, tinged with an undeniable flicker of awe. He was a man who commanded respect, who exuded authority. Yet in this moment, his posture seemed to falter, a subtle shift in his bearing that betrayed a profound inner turmoil. The casual dismissal, the veiled indifference that usually characterized interactions with the groundskeeper, vanished, replaced by an intensity that bordered on reverence. John? Briggs? Thorne's voice was still a whisper, but it was laced with a desperate need for confirmation. Is that truly you? Samuel, still with his back to the general, felt the weight of Thorn's gaze, the immense expectation in his voice. He had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, of blending into the background, of existing without truly being seen. To acknowledge Thorn now was to unravel a carefully woven tapestry of anonymity, to step back into a world he had painstakingly tried to leave behind. But the word, Warhound, had already done the damage. The ghost had been sighted. He slowly, deliberately, straightened his back, the hum of the mower fading as he disengaged the blades. He turned, his gaze finally meeting General Thorn's. His eyes, usually downcast and unassuming, now held a depth, a quiet intensity that was unnerving. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much, done too much, but who had never forgotten. General Thorn, a man who rarely showed emotion, gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath. The recognition was absolute. There was no longer any doubt. He dropped his worn leather briefcase to the meticulously trimmed grass with a soft thud, its contents forgotten, insignificant in the face of this astonishing revelation. And then, without hesitation, without a word, he snapped to attention, his right hand flying to his temple in a sharp, crisp salute. It was a salute of profound respect, of deepest gratitude, a gesture usually reserved for superior officers or heads of state. But it was being rendered to a man in a green jumpsuit, holding a lawnmower. The few officers and guards in the immediate vicinity, drawn by the sudden tension and the unusual sight of General Thorn's stationary presence, froze. They watched, bewildered, as a revered NATO commander saluted the groundskeeper. Their faces, a mixture of confusion and shock, reflected the utter impossibility of the scene unfolding before them. "Sir," General Thorn said, his voice now firm, clear, but still tinged with an almost reverent awe, "it is an honor. I had thought I had believed you were gone, lost." Samuel simply nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his head. He didn't return the salute. He couldn't. To accept it would be to acknowledge the rank, the past, the burden of a command he had long since relinquished. His gaze swept over the bewildered faces of the other military personnel, noting the dawning realization in their eyes, the sudden shift in their demeanor, their casual dismissal, their ingrained assumptions about his place in their hierarchy were shattering before their very eyes. "He once led my team out of Serbia," Thorn continued, his voice ringing with a newfound clarity, addressing not just Samuel, but the stunned audience of officers and guards. His words, though delivered with military precision, carried the weight of a profound personal experience, a testament to a legendary feat. It was 1999. We were deep behind enemy lines, surrounded, cut off, with no hope of extraction. Every intelligence report had us dead or captured, but he found us. He led us through 100 miles of hostile territory, through minefields and sniper alley, through blizzards and enemy patrols. He improvised, adapted, and overcame every obstacle. He brought every single one of us home, without a scratch. Thorn paused, his eyes gleaming with unshed emotion. "He's not a gardener, gentlemen. He's not a groundskeeper. He's a ghost. A phantom. The legendary Warhound." A collective gasp rippled through the small group. The name, whispered with awe and fear in the most elite circles, was now being openly declared. The groundskeeper, the quiet man in the green jumpsuit, was revealed to be a figure of mythical proportions, a legend whispered in hushed tones amongst Special Forces operatives. The security alert, the initial reason for General Thorn's visit, suddenly seemed trivial, overshadowed by this astonishing revelation. The meticulously ordered world of the NATO compound had been utterly upended. John, or rather Samuel Briggs, the unassuming groundskeeper, was no more. In his place stood Warhound, a man whose past was a tapestry of impossible missions and unparalleled heroism, a ghost from a war-torn past, now inexplicably tending flowers. The silence that followed was deafening, pregnant with the weight of revelation, and the profound, terrifying implications of his unexpected return. The story of the groundskeeper was over. The legend of Warhound had just begun. The revelation of Samuel Briggs as Warhound sent a ripple of bewildered silence through the NATO compound. A silence so profound it seemed to absorb the distant hum of the city and the murmur of the wind through the trees. The officers, initially frozen in shock, began to stir, their gazes shifting from the stoic groundskeeper to the unflappable General Thorne, as if seeking confirmation of this impossible truth. Their faces, once etched with casual dismissal, now reflected a complex mixture of awe, fear, and a dawning, almost uncomfortable, respect. The groundskeeper's uniform, once a symbol of his humble station, now seemed to cloak a figure of immense, almost terrifying power. General Thorne, having delivered his pronouncement, maintained his salute for a moment longer, a silent testament to the unwavering respect he held for Samuel. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand, but his gaze remained fixed on the man who had saved his life, a silent question lingering in his eyes. Why here? Why now? Samuel, for his part, remained impassive, his expression betraying nothing of the internal maelstrom of emotions. He had chosen this life, this anonymity, for a reason. He had sought peace in the mundane, in the rhythmic simplicity of tending to the earth. The shouts of combat, the screams of the injured, the constant thrum of adrenaline, those were ghosts he had meticulously buried. Now, Thorne's single word had resurrected them all. General Thorne, a young captain ventured, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you certain, sir? This man, he's been our groundskeeper for years. He barely speaks. The doubt, though respectful, was clear in his tone. The cognitive dissonance was almost too great to bear. Thorne turned his piercing gaze on the captain, his expression firm. Captain, I would recognize Warhound anywhere. The man saved my life, and the lives of my entire team when no one else could. His methods were unorthodox, his presence undetectable, his results absolute. Do not mistake his silence for weakness, nor his current occupation for his true capability. His words carried the weight of undeniable truth, silencing any further skepticism. The security alert, the initial cause of Thorne's arrival, suddenly returned to the forefront of their minds, now imbued with a terrifying new significance. If Warhound was here, if he was truly Samuel Briggs, then his presence wasn't a coincidence. It was providence. General Thorne, Samuel finally spoke, his voice low, a gravelly timbre that held an undeniable authority, a stark contrast to the deferential nods of the groundskeeper. The alert. What is the nature of the threat? He bypassed any personal acknowledgement, any discussion of his past, focusing solely on the present crisis. It was a familiar pattern, a characteristic that defined Warhound, always mission-focused, always one step ahead. Thorne, recognizing the shift in dynamic, immediately reverted to his professional demeanor, though an underlying current of profound respect remained. We have an unconfirmed report, sir, of an infiltration. Our perimeter sensors were tripped at Sector 7, but the anomaly vanished almost immediately. Our internal cameras show nothing. We're in lockdown, but we can't locate the source. Samuel's gaze swept over the compound, his eyes darting towards the precise location of Sector 7, an isolated, heavily wooded area on the perimeter. His mind, honed by years of reconnaissance and infiltration, was already processing the information, building scenarios, assessing probabilities. Vanished, you say? Unconfirmed report? His voice was calm, but the questions were precise, cutting to the heart of the security breach. Yes, sir, Thorne confirmed, a flicker of hope now replacing the earlier shock. Our best teams are sweeping the area, but they've found nothing. It's as if the intruder simply ceased to exist. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corners of Samuel's lips, a fleeting glimpse of the sardonic humor that had often punctuated Warhound's deadliest operations. They ceased to exist because they never existed in the first place, General. Not in the way your sensors understand it. The officers exchanged confused glances. Sir? The captain asked, bewildered. Samuel's eyes, suddenly sharp and intensely focused, scanned the air around them, the open windows, the subtle vibrations in the ground. It's a distraction, a sophisticated one. something designed to draw your attention away from the true ingress point. He turned, pointing to a seemingly innocuous maintenance tunnel entrance, partially obscured by overgrown bushes, far from Sector 7. It was a place only a groundskeeper, meticulous in his duties, would truly know. That tunnel. It leads directly to the main server room, bypassing 3 layers of internal security. It's too small for a conventional breach, but perfect for something smaller. Something subtle. Thorn's eyes widened, a flash of realization crossing his face. The server room! That's where the classified intelligence brief for the upcoming summit is being held. How could we have missed that? Because you were looking for an elephant when the threat was a mouse, Samuel stated simply, his gaze already moving towards the tunnel. And the mouse is carrying something valuable. His voice carried an urgent undertone, a command presence that brooked no argument. He dropped the lawnmower with a clatter onto the perfectly manicured grass, the tools of his humble profession momentarily forgotten. He moved with a sudden, fluid grace that utterly belied his age and his previous unassuming demeanor. The speed and precision of his movements were startling, revealing the latent power coiled within his unassuming frame. "General, assign me a 2-man team," Samuel commanded, his voice now crisp, authoritative, every syllable imbued with the urgency of the moment. "And have your cybersecurity teams prepare for a full system lockdown. Now." Thorn, without a moment's hesitation, barked orders. "Captain, you and Sergeant Davis, with Warhound, now. And get those cyber teams on full alert. Lock down everything." His voice, usually the epitome of controlled command, now held a tremor of excited anticipation, a quiet jubilation that Warhound was back, operating at full capacity. As the captain and sergeant, both highly trained Special Forces operatives, scrambled to follow, they looked at Samuel with a mixture of apprehension and dawning awe. The groundskeeper had become a tactical commander in an instant, his transformation complete and terrifyingly effective. Samuel, already moving towards the maintenance tunnel, his gait purposeful, looked back at Thorn. "General, tell me everything you know about the upcoming summit. Every detail, who's attending, what's being discussed, what the potential targets are." His mind was already formulating contingencies, anticipating the enemy's next move, analyzing their objectives. The quiet man of the garden had shed his disguise, and the legendary Warhound had taken command, ready to confront the unseen threat lurking within the very heart of the NATO compound. The stakes had just escalated, dramatically and irrevocably. The maintenance tunnel, a cramped, unlit conduit of pipes and wires, hummed with a low, metallic echo. To the captain and sergeant, seasoned Special Forces operatives, it felt like an alien environment, a confined space that stifled their usual freedom of movement. But for Samuel Briggs, for Warhound, it was a familiar terrain, a shadowy labyrinth where the conventional rules of engagement bent to his will. His steps were silent, his movements fluid and economical, despite the worn work boots. The grime and dust that coated the tunnel walls seemed to cling to him with a comfortable familiarity, a stark contrast to the sterile, manicured lawns outside. "Stay tight," Samuel whispered, his voice barely audible above the faint drip of condensation from overhead pipes. "Keep your eyes on the peripherals. They won't just be looking straight ahead." His words, though simple, carried the weight of countless infiltrations, of years spent navigating hostile environments unseen. The captain and sergeant, initially surprised by his sudden authority, now moved with a quiet deference, recognizing the profound difference between theoretical training and lived, deadly experience. The air in the tunnel grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of ozone and the unmistakable hum of high-voltage electronics. They were approaching the server room. Samuel paused, his head cocked slightly to one side, listening. His senses, honed over decades of operating in the shadows, were picking up faint irregularities, almost imperceptible anomalies in the ambient sounds. A subtle whirring, a frequency too high for normal ears, a barely audible click that shouldn't be there. "Motion sensors," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "Advanced, miniaturized. Pressure plates too, probably, hidden beneath the floor panels. And a laser grid, low power, but designed to trip an alarm if broken. He spoke not with the uncertainty of deduction, but with the absolute certainty of knowledge, as if he could see the invisible traps laid before them. The captain glanced at the sergeant. A silent communication of bewilderment. How could the groundskeeper know this? They were trained for years in counterintelligence and infiltration, yet this unassuming man in a green jumpsuit seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to perceive the unseen. Samuel reached into the small, worn utility belt of his groundskeeper uniform. He pulled out a small, unassuming plastic spray bottle, the kind used for misting plants. He gave it a single, precise pump, and a fine, almost invisible mist of water vapor hung in the air before them. Then, from a hidden pocket in his sleeve, he produced a miniature UV light, no bigger than his thumb. He activated it, sweeping the faint beam across the misty air. The air shimmered, revealing an intricate, almost invisible lattice of fine red laser beams, crisscrossing the tunnel like a deadly spiderweb. The captain and sergeant gasped, their eyes wide with shock. They had walked right into it. "Standard security protocol," Samuel stated, his voice calm, as if discussing the weather. "The water vapor reveals the beams. The UV light helps identify their frequency and bypass their primary sensor array. Now, follow my lead. Do exactly as I do. No deviations." He moved with an ethereal grace, twisting his body through the impossible maze of laser beams, his movements fluid, precise, almost acrobatic. He seemed to flow through the grid, his body a living key unlocking an invisible lock. The captain and sergeant, highly trained though they were, struggled to emulate his movements, their larger frames less agile, less accustomed to such extreme contortions. Sweat beaded on their brows as they followed, narrowly avoiding tripping the alarms. As they navigated the laser grid, Samuel continued to provide a running commentary, a chilling glimpse into the mind of Warhound. "This is a team," he whispered, gesturing to a subtle imperfection in the wall, a barely noticeable dislodged pipe. "Professionals. They know what they're doing. They're targeting the summit briefing. That means they're not just after data, they want to disrupt the summit, to sow chaos." His analysis was sharp, intuitive, seen beyond the immediate threat to the larger strategic implications. They finally reached a heavy, reinforced door, unmarked and seemingly impenetrable. A digital keypad glowed faintly beside it. "Biometric scanner," Samuel stated, his voice low. "And a pressure plate lock. Standard stuff for high-value targets." He pulled out a small, almost microscopic device from another hidden pocket, a thin wire no thicker than a hair. With deft, impossibly steady hands, he inserted it into a tiny, almost invisible seam in the keypad. His fingers danced across the surface, manipulating the internal mechanisms with a touch so light it seemed to defy logic. A faint click echoed through the tunnel. The green light on the keypad flashed. "The biometrics," the captain whispered, utterly bewildered. "How did you?" "They're designed to scan for human fingerprints and retinal patterns," Samuel explained without looking up, his eyes focused on the lock mechanism. "But they also generate a low-frequency electromagnetic field unique to the individual. I just used a frequency modulator to replicate the signature of a high-clearance officer whose pattern I observed earlier today. Took a moment to calibrate it with the pressure plate sensor beneath the door. Now, stand clear." He pulled a small, almost childlike toy magnet from his pocket, the kind found in children's novelty sets. He placed it carefully on the pressure plate, then pushed the door open. It swung inward silently, revealing a brightly lit, humongous server room, rows upon rows of humming machines glowing with an ethereal blue light. The air in the server room crackled with an undeniable tension. Two figures, dressed in dark, tactical gear, were hunched over a main server console, their fingers flying across keyboards. They wore full-face balaclavas, obscuring their identities. One of them, a smaller, leaner figure, was inserting a data stick into a port. The other, larger and more muscular, held a silenced pistol, his gaze sweeping the room, his movements alert and predatory. Samuel, without a moment's hesitation, assessed the situation. Two hostiles. One focused on data extraction, the other on security. He was outnumbered, but he had the element of surprise. "Drop your weapons." Samuel's voice cut through the hum of the servers, calm yet commanding, echoing through the sterile environment. The two intruders froze, then reacted with lightning speed. The larger intruder spun, raising his silenced pistol, his movements fluid and trained. The smaller intruder ripped the data stick from the server, tucking it into a pouch. But Samuel was faster. He moved with a speed that defied human perception. A blur of motion. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need one. He used the environment. With a powerful, unexpected kick, he dislodged a heavy server rack, sending it toppling towards the larger intruder. The man cursed, dropping his pistol as he scrambled to avoid the falling equipment. Before the captain or sergeant could react, Samuel was on the smaller intruder. He didn't engage in a direct fight. He used a series of precise, disarming movements, targeting pressure points, joint locks, and nerve clusters. The smaller intruder, despite their obvious training, crumpled to the floor with a choked gasp, the data stick skittering across the polished floor. The larger intruder, having narrowly avoided being crushed, drew a combat knife, his eyes blazing with fury. He lunged at Samuel, the blade glinting wickedly in the fluorescent light. This was a direct, brutal confrontation, a test of raw combat skill. Samuel met the charge head-on. He didn't dodge, he parried, his movements economical, fluid, almost artistic in their lethal efficiency. He blocked the knife attack with a seemingly impossible deflection, then spun, using the intruder's own momentum against him. A swift, precise strike to the temple, and the larger man dropped, unconscious. The entire engagement had lasted mere seconds, a whirlwind of calculated violence that left the captain and sergeant stunned, their own weapons still half-drawn. They had been mere spectators to a master at work, witnessing the legendary Warhound in full, terrifying action. Samuel, his breathing even, surveyed the downed intruders. He picked up the data stick, examining it carefully, his eyes narrowed in intense concentration. "They were after the summit schedules," he murmured, his voice grim, "and the secure communication frequencies. This isn't just about disruption, it's about control." He turned to the captain and sergeant, his gaze sharp and commanding. "Secure the perimeter. Check for additional threats. And get General Thorne down here. Tell him Warhound has a lead, and it's bigger than we thought." The groundskeeper, once dismissed as invisible, had not only exposed a sophisticated infiltration, but had single-handedly neutralized the threat, revealing a depth of skill and tactical brilliance that bordered on the brass. Mythical. The server room, now secure, hummed with a different kind of energy, an unspoken recognition of the ghost who had walked among them, now fully, terrifyingly, revealed. The story of Samuel Briggs was over. The legend of Warhound had just taken its deadliest turn. The server room, now secured and humming with the presence of General Thorne and a contingent of his elite cybersecurity team, felt like a command center resurrected from a classified past. The two intruders, unconscious and bound, lay on the floor, their balaclavas removed, revealing grim, determined faces unknown to the compound's security records. Samuel, who had effortlessly disarmed and neutralized them, now stood by the main console, his gaze fixed on a recovered data stick. The meticulous order of the server racks, once the focus of the attack, now served as a backdrop to the unfolding revelation. The data stick, Warhound? General Thorne's voice was taut with anticipation. He had arrived minutes earlier, his face a mixture of profound relief and an almost childlike eagerness to witness the legend in action. He watched Samuel with an intensity that verged on reverence, a stark contrast to the dismissive glances he'd once given the groundskeeper. Samuel inserted the stick into a secure terminal, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with a speed and fluency that belied his unassuming persona. Lines of encrypted code scrolled across the screen, a digital language that few could understand. His eyes, sharp and focused, devoured the information, unraveling layers of encryption with practiced ease. The cybersecurity experts, initially skeptical, watched in stunned silence, their own advanced tools rendered almost obsolete by his intuitive understanding of the complex algorithms. "They didn't just want schedules and frequencies, General," Samuel stated, his voice low and grim, as he deciphered the final layers of code. This stick contains an adaptive malware. It's designed to embed itself into the NATO network, collecting intelligence on troop movements, asset deployments, and, most critically, our rapid response protocols for a specific region, the Baltic states. Thorn's face hardened. The Baltic states? That aligns with the intel we've been receiving about heightened aggression on the eastern flank. So, this wasn't just a simple intelligence grab. This was reconnaissance for a larger operation, a prelude to something far more aggressive. Precisely, Samuel confirmed, a cold, steely resolve settling in his eyes. This malware isn't designed for a quick download and exfiltration. It's a sleeper. Once activated, it would continuously feed data back to its source, creating a real-time picture of NATO defensive posture in PED. That region, a prelude to an invasion. His voice held an undeniable weight, the gravity of the potential crisis palpable in the sterile server room. Who is behind this, Warhound? Thorn demanded, his voice low, guttural. Do you recognize anything? Any signatures? Any patterns? Samuel paused, his gaze fixed on a particular string of code, a subtle digital watermark. A flicker of something, a distant memory, passed through his eyes. This signature, it's old, very old. It's a variant of a highly specialized, proprietary encryption protocol used by a clandestine organization, a shadowy group that operated in the post-Soviet era, focused on destabilizing emerging democracies and exploiting fractured geopolitical landscapes. They called themselves the Obsidian Hand. Thorn frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration. The Obsidian Hand? I thought they were dismantled years ago. A loose collection of rogue agents, ex-intelligence operatives, and disaffected military personnel. We believed them to be defunct. They were, Samuel confirmed, his voice laced with a subtle bitterness. But their ideology, their network, always lingered in the shadows. This level of sophistication, this adaptation of their old protocols, it suggests a significant resurgence. Someone has reunited them, General. Someone with immense resources and a very specific agenda. The cybersecurity team, now fully engaged, began to murmur among themselves, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning realization. The implications of the Obsidian Hand's resurgence, especially with such advanced capabilities, were terrifying. We need to identify their leadership, Thorn stated, his voice firm, and their operational hub. If they're planning something in the Baltics, we need to preempt it. Now that we have this malware, can we trace it back to its source? Samuel shook his head. Not directly. The malware has a dead man's switch. Any attempt to trace it will self-destruct the data and trigger a system wipe, alerting them to our discovery. It's designed to be a one-way street, a ghost in the machine. Then what do we do? Thorn asked, a rare hint of desperation in his voice. Samuel's gaze hardened, his eyes holding the cold, calculating glint of a predator. We let them think they succeeded. We let the sleeper malware deploy. But we don't let it sleep. We turn it into a beacon. The cybersecurity team gasped. Sir, that's incredibly risky. If we don't contain it, it could compromise our entire network. It will be contained, Samuel stated, his voice unwavering. I will create a compartmentalized, isolated digital environment, a sandbox. We let the malware deploy within that environment, thinking it's infiltrating our main network. But every piece of data it sends out, every digital breadcrumb, will be rerouted, analyzed, and traced. We turn their own weapon against them. We use their ghost to hunt their ghost. Thorn stared at him, a profound admiration in his eyes. It was a classic Warhound maneuver, unconventional, audacious, and brilliantly deceptive. Can you do it, Warhound? Without compromising our live systems? I built similar systems for Unit Alpha, Samuel replied, a subtle, almost imperceptible reference to his old, top-secret unit, a unit even more clandestine than Thorn's own past. This is a refinement of that. It will take time, precise calibration, and complete access to your network infrastructure. But yes, I can do it. And then, we track the Obsidian Hand back to its lair. He turned to the cybersecurity team, his voice now crisp and commanding. I need every schematics of your network, every firewall, every routing table, Every server log. I need your best engineers, working under my direct supervision. This is no longer about patching a breach, it's about a counter-infiltration. We're going to feed them misinformation, false data, and use their own system to lead us to their command and control. The cybersecurity chief, a seasoned expert who had initially dismissed Samuel, now nodded, his expression one of complete deference. Yes, sir. Anything you need. Consider it done. Over the next 72 hours, the NATO command compound transformed. The quiet groundskeeper's uniform was replaced by tactical gear, though Samuel still moved with the same silent, fluid grace. The server room became his command center, a flurry of activity under his precise direction. He worked relentlessly, his mind a whirlwind of code, algorithms, and strategic planning. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. He instructed the cyber teams with a clarity and depth of knowledge that left them awestruck, devising complex firewalls and data traps that baffled even the most experienced analysts. He crafted a meticulously deceptive digital environment, a mirror image of the NATO network, within which the Obsidian Hand's malware would operate, completely unaware that it was feeding data to its unwitting hunters. He carefully injected false intelligence, misleading troop movements, and irrelevant data points, turning the malware into a double agent, feeding false information back to its masters. Thorn remained by his side, observing, learning, and facilitating whatever resources Samuel required. The respect between them had deepened, forged in the crucible of shared purpose. Thorn recognized the sheer genius of Samuel's approach, the audacious simplicity of turning the enemy's strength into their greatest weakness. As the final lines of code for the deceptive network were implemented, Samuel leaned back, rubbing his temples, a rare sigh escaping his lips. "It's active, General," he stated, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep, but clear with triumph. "The malware is deployed. It thinks it's in our network. And now we wait for the data. We wait for it to lead us home." Thorn placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, a gesture of profound gratitude. "You've done it, Warhound. You've turned the tide. What's next?" Samuel looked at him, a grim determination in his eyes. "Next, General, we hunt. The Obsidian Hand has underestimated us. They just stepped into a trap, one they helped us build. And when we find their command node, when we locate their leadership, then the Warhound will be unleashed." The unassuming groundskeeper had not only saved NATO from an imminent threat, but had set a trap for a shadowy global organization, a testament to the legend that was Warhound. The true hunt was just beginning. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of data analysis and strategic planning within the NATO command compound. The server room, now illuminated by the constant glow of monitors, had become the epicenter of a high-stakes digital chess match. Samuel, fueled by an almost inhuman stamina, remained at the helm, his gaunt face reflecting the intensity of his focus. The deceptive network he had crafted, the digital labyrinth designed to ensnare the Obsidian Hand's malware, was working flawlessly. It was a testament to his unparalleled expertise, a digital phantom mirroring the physical ghost he had once been. The malware, believing it had infiltrated the core NATO network, was busily transmitting what it perceived as critical intelligence back to its masters. Every byte, every packet of data, was meticulously captured and analyzed by Samuel and his augmented cybersecurity team. The raw data, initially a chaotic stream of encrypted signals, slowly began to coalesce into patterns, into fragments of a larger picture. "They're interested in naval movements, General," Samuel stated one afternoon, pointing to a holographic projection that displayed a flurry of intercepted data. "Specifically, the deployment schedule of our fleet in the North Sea, and our submarine patrols." His voice was hoarse, but his mind remained sharp, connecting seemingly disparate pieces of information. Thorn, ever present by his side, nodded grimly. "Naval assets. That indicates an intention to project power, to control strategic maritime routes. This isn't just about land-based aggression in the Baltics anymore. They're planning something on a much larger scale." The cyber team, now working in seamless synchronicity with Samuel, managed to isolate a faint, recurring digital signature embedded within the malware's communication protocols. It was like a unique fingerprint, a subtle marker left by the individuals controlling the Obsidian Hand's operations. This signature, it has a peculiar rhythmic pulse. One of the junior analysts, a brilliant but usually reserved young woman named Anya Sharma, pointed out, her voice filled with an almost childlike wonder. It's almost like a heartbeat, a human signature within the machine. Samuel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing through them. A heartbeat, you say? Analyze its cadence, its frequency. Is it consistent? Anya worked furiously, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Yes, sir. Remarkably consistent. Like a unique biological rhythm translated into a digital pulse. It's impossible. No. Wait. It reminds me of something I read in an old declassified intelligence report about advanced bioauthentication systems, experimental ones from the late 90s. End quote. Samuel's breath hitched. The late 90s. Obsidian Hand and Project Chimera. Anya, cross-reference that pulse with any known biometric signatures from the defunct Cerberus Dynamics, particularly their Project Chimera research. Every single one. Anya looked at him, bewildered. Cerberus Dynamics? That project was shut down, sir. All data purged. Do it anyway, Samuel commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. Sometimes, fragments remain. Ghost data. Look for anything that aligns with this digital pulse. He felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. If his hunch was correct, if the Obsidian Hand was truly connected to Project Chimera, then the threat was far more personal, far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. He remembered the reports, the terrifying capabilities of Chimera, a bioengineered combat system that was supposed to be a myth. Hours later, as dawn painted the horizon, a muted gray, Anya let out a cry of triumph. Sir, I found it, a partial match. A biometric signature from a lead researcher on Project Chimera, Dr. Eris Thorne. It's almost a perfect match for the digital heartbeat, but Dr. Thorne was reported deceased in a lab accident over 20 years ago. General Thorne, who had been listening intently, stiffened. Eris Thorne? My brother? He was a brilliant but deeply troubled man, obsessed with his work. But he died. I attended his funeral. Samuel's gaze was piercing, fixed on the general. Deceased? Or disappeared? The Obsidian Hand specialized in making people disappear, General. And they also specialized in resurrecting concepts, and sometimes people, who were thought to be gone. The implication hung heavy in the air, a chilling possibility that shattered Thorne's personal narrative. My brother alive? And leading the Obsidian Hand? Thorne murmured, his face ashen, grappling with the profound betrayal, the terrifying twist of fate. He would never. He was a patriot, despite his eccentricities. He was also deeply disillusioned with the military-industrial complex, Samuel stated, his voice devoid of judgment, simply stating facts. He believed that true progress required operating outside the confines of ethical boundaries. Project Chimera was the epitome of that belief. If he's alive and leading the Obsidian Hand, then his agenda is far more dangerous than just simple destabilization. End quote. The new intelligence provided a critical breakthrough. By combining the digital heartbeat with other subtle clues gleaned from the malware, Samuel began to narrow down the potential operational hub of the Obsidian Hand. The data pointed to a remote, abandoned industrial complex in a desolate, frozen region of Eastern Europe. A place so remote it barely registered on modern maps. This is it, General, Samuel declared, pointing to a flickering satellite image on the main screen. The image showed a vast, dilapidated complex, half buried in snow, its desolate appearance belying the potential for unimaginable technological power beneath. This is where Project Chimera was originally conceived. It's the perfect place for its resurrection. Thorne stared at the image, a grim determination hardening his features. Then, that's where we go. Warhound. Prepare a small, elite strike team. We move within 24 hours. This is no longer just a defensive operation. It's a surgical strike. We need to neutralize Eris and stop Project Chimera before they unleash their full capabilities. Samuel nodded, a rare, almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes. The hunt was reaching its climax. He was no longer just analyzing data. He was preparing for direct action, for a return to the brutal realities of his past. The adrenaline, long dormant, began to hum through his veins, a familiar companion. "General, a word of caution," Samuel stated, his voice low, serious. "Eris Thorn is not just a scientist. He was a brilliant tactician, a master of deception. And if he has resurrected Chimera, then we will be facing not just advanced technology, but a mind that anticipates our every move. This will be the most dangerous mission we've ever undertaken." Thorn met his gaze, a quiet resolve in his eyes. Then, "I'm glad Warhound is leading the charge. You brought me out of Serbia, Samuel. I have no doubt you'll bring us through this too." Samuel simply nodded. He turned to the cyber team, his instructions concise, precise. Maintain the deceptive network, keep feeding them false data, and prepare for a full system purge once we confirm their location. Leave no trace. We go in silent, we strike hard, and we disappear. As the cyber team scrambled to execute his commands, Samuel felt a strange mix of anticipation and trepidation. He had sought anonymity, peace, a life far removed from the shadows. But the world had pulled him back, and the ghost, Warhound, was ready to re-enter the fray. The garden was left behind, the battlefield beckoned. The confrontation with Eris Thorn, a ghost from Thorn's past and a looming threat to global security, was now inevitable. The hunt for the Obsidian Hand, led by the unassuming Groundskeeper, was about to reach its explosive, decisive conclusion. The biting wind, a relentless sculptor of snowdrifts, tore across the desolate, abandoned industrial complex in Eastern Europe. The air was thick with the scent of frozen earth and decaying metal, a chilling prelude to the confrontation that awaited them. Samuel, clad in specialized Arctic tactical gear, moved through the blizzard with the practiced ease of a phantom, his steps silent, his breath barely visible in the frigid air. Beside him, General Thorn, also in Arctic gear, and a small, elite NATO strike team, followed, their faces grim, their movements precise. The journey had been arduous, a clandestine insertion into one of the most inhospitable regions on Earth, but the stakes were too high for hesitation. "The thermal signatures indicate multiple hostiles inside, General," Samuel whispered, his voice barely audible above the howl of the wind, his eyes scanning the snow-laden structures through specialized optics. "And the energy output from the central building suggests the primary Chimera control node is fully active. They're powering up for something significant." His analysis was instantaneous, drawing on years of interpreting environmental cues and technological signatures. Thorn nodded, his jaw set. "We proceed as planned. Surgical strike on the central node. Neutralize Eris Thorn. Secure the Chimera prototype." His voice was firm, but a subtle tremor of personal conflict lay beneath his professional resolve. This was not just a mission. It was a confrontation with a ghost from his own family, a brilliant mind twisted by dangerous ideology. Samuel led the team through a labyrinth of derelict warehouses and decaying machinery, utilizing the swirling snow as cover. His memory of the complex's original blueprints, obtained from declassified Cerberus Dynamics files, proved invaluable, guiding them through hidden access points and disused tunnels, bypassing external sensors. He was a master of infiltration, a ghost in the machine of the abandoned industrial behemoth. They reached a reinforced service entrance, heavily camouflaged by snow and ice. Samuel produced a small, sophisticated cutting tool, its laser-fine beams silently slicing through the hardened steel. The process was slow, painstaking, but utterly noiseless. As the final section of steel fell inward, revealing a dark, ominous corridor, Samuel paused, his senses on high alert. "Pressure plates and motion sensors. Standard fare," he murmured, "and a multispectral camera array hidden within the ceiling panels. They're expecting us. Or, at least, they're prepared for an intrusion." His words were a confirmation of the enemy's sophistication, their anticipation of a counterattack. He deployed a small, almost invisible drone, no larger than his thumb, that hummed silently into the corridor. Its multispectral cameras transmitted real-time data back to his wrist-mounted tablet. He quickly identified the laser tripwires, the heat signatures of hidden sensors, and the subtle currents of air that betrayed the presence of concealed pressure plates. "They've modified the system," Samuel stated, a flicker of appreciation for his opponent's ingenuity in his eyes. "It's adaptive. Each pass of the drone changes the sensor array's frequency and sensitivity. A living defense. Can you bypass it, Warhound?" Thorne asked, his voice low with urgency. Samuel nodded, a grim determination settling on his face. "We adapt. Just like them." He began to issue precise commands to his team, directing them to deploy specific jamming devices, to mask their thermal signatures, and to move in an erratic, unpredictable pattern that would confuse the adaptive sensors. He was a conductor, orchestrating a silent ballet of infiltration, guiding his team through an invisible minefield. They moved through the corridor, a synchronized unit, each step precisely calculated, each breath held in anticipation. The air grew warmer, infused with the sterile scent of advanced electronics and the faint tang of biochemicals. They were close. The corridor opened into a vast, brightly lit cavern, a futuristic laboratory nestled within the decaying industrial shell. Rows of gleaming, experimental machinery hummed with power. Holographic displays flickered with complex biological schematics and tactical projections. And at the center of it all, encased in a shimmering containment field, stood the terrifying culmination of Project Chimera. A bioengineered construct, humanoid in form but with an unsettling predatory grace, its eyes glowing with an eerie, intelligent light. It was a weapon, alive and terrifyingly potent. Standing before the containment field, his back to them, was a figure in a pristine white lab coat, his silver hair reflecting the cold, sterile light. Dr. Eris Thorne. He was alive, and he was clearly the architect of this nightmare. "Eris," General Thorne whispered, a raw, emotional note in his voice. The personal element of the mission, long suppressed, suddenly burst forth. Eris Thorne turned slowly, his face etched with the ravages of time and a chilling fanaticism. His eyes, once sharp with scientific curiosity, now held a cold, ruthless gleam. He looked from General Thorne to Samuel, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his lips. "Maxwell," Eris said, his voice smooth, devoid of surprise. "And, Warhound, I had wondered when you would emerge from the shadows, Samuel. You were always a thorn in my side, a ghost that refused to stay buried." "You shouldn't have resurfaced, Eris," Samuel stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The Obsidian Hand was a relic, chimera, a nightmare best left forgotten. Eris chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed in the vast cavern. "A relic? A nightmare? No, Samuel. It is evolution. The world is too soft, too fractured. It needs a firm hand, a guiding force. And Project Chimera, it is that force. A perfect blend of organic and synthetic, capable of adapting, conquering, of bringing order to chaos." He gestured to the contained bioweapon with a proprietary pride. "You're insane, Eris," Thorne interjected, his voice filled with disgust. "Am I, Maxwell? Or am I simply seeing the truth that you are too blind to accept?" Eris countered, his gaze shifting back to his brother. "This summit, your precious NATO alliances, they are obsolete. I am simply accelerating the inevitable. With Chimera, I will rewrite the geopolitical map, starting with the Baltics." Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. Alarms blared. Samuel's comms crackled. "Warhound! We've been detected. A secondary sensor array, hidden. They're locking onto our position." It was Anya's voice, filled with urgency. Eris smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. "You may have infiltrated my outer defenses, Samuel, but you underestimated my depth. This facility is a living entity, constantly learning, constantly adapting. I knew you would come. I've been waiting for you, and now, you're trapped." Concealed laser grids activated, crisscrossing the cavern, trapping Samuel and his team. Automated turrets, previously hidden, whirred to life, their barrels tracking their movements. And then, with a low hum, The containment field around Project Chimera began to retract, slowly revealing the bioengineered weapon, its glowing eyes fixed on Samuel, a silent, deadly promise of unleashed power. "Chimera will handle your team, Samuel," Eris declared, his voice filled with a mad confidence. "And then, it will lead the Obsidian Hand to its destiny. You were always an obstacle, Warhound, but even ghosts can be laid to rest." Samuel's face remained impassive, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, darted around the cavern, assessing the threats, analyzing the layout, searching for an opening, a weakness. The Groundskeeper had found his ultimate adversary, a ghost from his past, resurrected and armed with a terrifying future. The final, brutal confrontation between Warhound and Chimera had begun, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. The legend, forged in the fires of Serbia, was about to face its ultimate test. The cavern, once a silent monument to forbidden science, now echoed with the harsh clang of alarms, the rhythmic thud of automated turrets, and the low, guttural growl emanating from the unleashed Chimera. Samuel, his Arctic gear making him one with the shadows, moved with an almost preternatural calm amidst the chaos. General Thorne and his strike team, initially stunned by Eris's calculated trap, reacted with the disciplined precision of trained operatives, taking cover behind machinery, engaging the reactivated turrets with precise bursts of gunfire. But all eyes, ultimately, were drawn to the terrifying bioengineered construct now fully free from its containment. Chimera, a monstrosity of fused organic and synthetic components, moved with an unsettling fluidity, its every motion a testament to its terrifying design. Its glowing eyes, intelligent and malevolent, locked onto Samuel, recognizing him as the primary threat. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a hunter, programmed for his neutralization. "Warhound," Eris Thorne's voice, amplified by hidden speakers, resonated throughout the cavern, laced with a chilling mix of triumph and madness. "A final test for the legendary ghost. You may have thwarted my initial plan, but you cannot defeat evolution itself. Chimera is the future." Samuel ignored Eris, his focus solely on Chimera. He had faced impossible odds before, had overcome threats that defied conventional logic. This was different. This was not a human adversary, nor a machine in the traditional sense. This was a living weapon, designed by a brilliant, twisted mind, purpose-built for combat. He needed to find a weakness, a flaw in its design, a vulnerability that transcended its physical prowess. He didn't engage Chimera directly. Instead, he moved with fluid, deceptive grace, utilizing the cavern's complex layout, the rows of humming machinery, and the flickering lights as cover. He was a phantom, darting through the chaos, drawing Chimera's attention, guiding its movements, while the rest of the strike team focused on neutralizing the automated turrets. Chimera moved with astonishing speed, its movements unpredictable, almost mimicking a highly trained martial artist. It lashed out with bladed forearms, slammed through server racks, and leaped impossible distances, its roars echoing through the cavern. Samuel, ever elusive, narrowly dodged each attack, his mind rapidly processing Chimera's combat patterns, its strengths, and, more importantly, its weaknesses. "General," Samuel barked into his comms, his voice strained but clear. "Focus fire on the auxiliary power conduits for the turrets. Cripple their external defenses." He continued to evade Chimera, drawing it away from Thorne and his team, sacrificing himself as a decoy. As Thorne and his team successfully neutralized the turrets, the chaos in the cavern momentarily subsided, leaving only the terrifying confrontation between Warhound and Chimera. Samuel, still evading, noticed a recurring pattern in Chimera's movements, a subtle flicker in its glowing eyes when it executed a particularly complex maneuver, a momentary hesitation in its fluid grace when it absorbed an impact. It was a biological tell, a brief neural overload as its organic and synthetic components struggled to integrate complex commands. "Eris," Samuel called out, his voice cutting through the hum of the lab. "Your perfect creation has a flaw. It's too complex. Its brain can't handle the sheer volume of its own movements. He was taunting Eris, hoping to provoke a reaction, to force a mistake. Eris, his face contorted in a sneer, scoffed. Nonsense, Samuel. Chimera's neural network is flawless. It adapts faster than any human. It adapts, but it overloads, Samuel retorted. He suddenly changed his evasion pattern, moving with an even greater, more erratic speed, forcing Chimera to execute increasingly complex, high-G maneuvers. He was pushing it, forcing it to its breaking point. Chimera roared in frustration, its movements becoming slightly less fluid, its attacks more desperate. The flickers in its eyes became more pronounced, its hesitation more frequent. Samuel had found the crack in its armor, the single point of vulnerability in its otherwise formidable design. He made his move. As Chimera launched a devastating flurry of blows, Samuel didn't dodge. Instead, with a move of impossible speed, he slipped inside its attack, closing the distance, his hand reaching for a specific point on Chimera's neck, a subtle juncture where its organic and synthetic components visibly met. He remembered the old schematics of Project Chimera, the core neural interface, a vital point where all its complex systems converged. With a powerful, precise movement, he struck. Not with a weapon, but with the bare force of his hand, a calculated pressure point strike, delivered with the full, devastating force of his legendary strength. He severed the neural link, bypassing the layers of synthetic armor and the intricate biological systems, striking at the very core of its consciousness. Chimera froze, its glowing eyes flickering wildly, then dimming. Its powerful limbs spasmed, its roars turning into a low, dying moan. He trembled, a colossal form suddenly vulnerable, then collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash, its form unnervingly still. Silence descended upon the cavern, broken only by the heavy breathing of Thorn's team and the faint hum of the machinery. Chimera, the ultimate weapon, was defeated. Not by brute force, but by intellect, by precision, by the tactical genius of Warhound. Eris Thorn stared at his fallen creation, his face etched with disbelief, then with a profound, terrifying rage. No! You impossible ghost. You ruined everything. He lunged for a console, his fingers flying across the controls, attempting to initiate a self-destruct sequence, to destroy his masterpiece rather than let it fall into enemy hands. General, stop him! Samuel yelled, his voice strained from the exertion of his fight. Thorn, who had been watching in stunned awe, reacted instantly. He tackled his brother, pulling him away from the console, a fierce struggle ensuing between the two siblings, a personal battle playing out amidst the wreckage of a global threat. As Thorn grappled with Eris, Samuel, ever vigilant, noticed a faint, recurring pulse on a smaller, secondary console. Eris had a backup plan, a failsafe. A signal was being sent, a final, desperate transmission. He rushed to the console, his fingers flying across the keypad, overriding the controls, shutting down the transmission just as the final byte was about to be sent. It was a digital dead man's switch, a final act of malice designed to alert the remaining Obsidian Hand cells of their failure, and to unleash other, unknown contingencies. It's done, Samuel announced, his voice flat, exhausted. The transmission is stopped. No more signals are getting out. He looked at Thorn, who now held his brother in a firm, unbreakable grip. Eris's struggles slowly diminishing. Thorn looked at Samuel, his eyes filled with gratitude and profound relief, but also with a deep sadness as he looked at his captured brother. Warhound, he saved us. Again. Samuel simply nodded. He looked around the Nucleant cavern, at the downed Chimera, at the grim faces of the strike team. The mission was accomplished. The threat neutralized. But the echoes of the battle, the ghosts of his past, would linger. The unassuming groundskeeper, Samuel Briggs, had, once again, stepped from the shadows to save the world. The legend of Warhound had been reaffirmed, not by the roar of explosions or the might of armies, but by the quiet genius of a man who saw what others missed, and who fought with a precision that transcended conventional warfare. He was no longer just a ghost. He was a silent guardian, forever ready to answer the call, forever ready to unleash the Warhound within. The world, unknowingly, owed him an immeasurable debt. And somewhere, perhaps, a garden waited for his quiet return.